All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. and the major underestimation that Terence Crawford is making according to sources, boxing experts that I spoke to, and what will mean the downfall of Terence Crawford in this fight if his camp doesn't change one thing. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about the 147-pound division, the welterweight division. And in this one, we're going to talk about Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. specifically in a fight that is rumored to be going to be announced on 4th of July weekend after these next couple of fights take place so that they can build up the fight towards the end of the year. Date of October 29th has been spun around out there. All of this, of course, is yet to be verified. However, all of it is falling in line with the report that Mike Coppinger put out last week. So I'm looking forward to the fight, and a lot of people are looking forward to the fight, and are more encouraged about it happening than they had been in the past. Now, I've got a lot of friends in boxing. Some people know a lot more than me about the technical issues of boxing. And one of the people I spoke to, former trainer, former top level contender, gave their, and I'm not going to say their name because they will like to stay confidential, but just so that you know, we do know people in a lot of the camps of current world champions that just do not mention their names because of all the stuff that goes around with that. However, this individual I've got a lot of respect for, really doesn't miss the mark very often, and really did talked about what Roy Jones Jr., Antonio Tarver, and Paulie Malignaggi had to say about the Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford fight, and pretty much said in a nutshell, look, what these guys do not understand about Errol Spence Jr. is going to turn around and really bite Terence Crawford, because Errol Spence Jr. is a different type of guy than a lot of people think he is. And pretty much here is what it is. He used this comparison. He said, do you remember when Prince Nassim Hamed was coming up, or actually, do you remember when Junior Witter had beaten Marco Antonio Barrera multiple times, and it looked like Marco Antonio Barrera was just a come forward fighter that could get, that was going to be pretty much a victim for Prince Nassim Hamed, who had this super athleticism, this super reflexes, right? Was extremely, extremely powerful, could drop dudes with either hand, getting a bunch of really quick knockouts. And then he gets in the ring with Marco Antonio Barrera, and he does not realize that Marco Antonio Barrera can really, really box. He is not somebody that is just a come forward fighter that, is going to rock 'em, sock 'em robots with you. He's also somebody that can do a lot of things in the ring. And the handlers of Prince Nassim Hamed made a huge mistake with Marco Antonio Barrera, believing that Marco Antonio Barrera was just some cookie cutter type of fighter who was going to just walk down the more athletic, the more highly skilled and special talent of Prince Nassim Hamed, and walked into a dude that can do a lot more in that ring than people had previously thought. And he said when he looks at this fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., especially after Errol Spence Jr. came out with this, kill or be killed motto out on Instagram, and when Roy Jones Jr. says, look, we know for sure what Errol Spence Jr. is going to bring to the fight. Antonio Tarver says, we know exactly what Errol Spence Jr. is going to bring to the fight. Paulie Malignaggi says, we know exactly what Errol Spence Jr. is going to bring to the fight. That is a number one cardinal rule that you do not do. You do not make assumptions that you know what this guy is going to do in that ring, because he goes about beating certain fighters in certain ways. And just making the assumption that because you have not seen him make adjustments to certain things and be able to do certain things at certain times, just because you've not seen that does not mean that it does not exist. And specifically pointed to Errol Spence Jr.'s amateur career and said, if you, like, for example, like the way that you hear Roy Jones Jr. talk about him and Antonio Tarver talking about him, like as if the only thing that he is going to do is come forward, and that's the only thing he can do. And if Terence Crawford just figures that one thing out, then it's just going to be easy sailing for Terence Crawford. However, at the same time, what he says about what Antonio Tarver said about Shakur Stevenson, he said, look, Shakur Stevenson's the only one that has that Olympic amateur pedigree to be able to deal with Devin Haney. However, neglecting to realize that Errol Spence Jr. has an extensive amateur pedigree, was a quarterfinalist in the Olympic, won multiple national championships in a system that is about scoring. It is about boxing, hitting and not being hit. If he did not have the ability to hit and not be hit, he would not have made it through the Olympic trials. He would have not made it to the quarterfinals, of the Olympics. He actually can box in a professional style, but yet still manage to hit and make people and prevent people from landing cleanly on him. So the trap that Terence Crawford may be falling into is massively underestimating the versatility of Errol Spence Jr. and Errol being at certain times in the fight being able to react to what you're doing and take that away from you. So, for example, if Terence Crawford just believes that all Errol Spence Jr. can do is come forward, and then he gets caught in a situation where Errol is having success coming to the inside, Terence Crawford makes an adjustment, and then Errol Spence Jr. backs off of him and is fighting from the outside in a spurt, where now Terence has to make an adjustment to the fact that Errol has shifted from fighting coming forward to fighting him on the back foot, like you saw him do with Mikey Garcia when Errol was not in a very good physical shape. Now, as we know, Errol Spence Jr. attested and said, look, for many fight camps, I really didn't have the energy to really go all out on guys because I was not training properly in between fights. But when he fought Mikey Garcia, and it was in the throes of that type of scenario where he was having fat camps and he really didn't have the energy just to go all out on Mikey, that pretty much he fought on the back foot with Mikey, stayed at a safe distance and just scored on him for a while and did not really leave that mid-range or that outer mid-range and just scored on him for rounds and actually forced Mikey Garcia, who thought that Errol was just going to be coming, to adjust his game plan to a guy that wasn't coming. A guy, pause, I know a lot of people, y'all have crazy minds, that aren't coming at you, right? So my guy is saying, look, that is the real risk that people that have that think about Errol Spence Jr. like Floyd May, like Roy Jones Jr. is thinking about it, and even Paulie Malignaggi and Antonio Tarver are thinking about it. What happens if that guy really can do some things that you don't know if he can do, right? Because you just have your mindset that he's just going to be coming at you and he's a one-dimensional fighter that's fighting on the front foot and that's all he can do because that's what he has been successful at doing, right? Similarly to think that because Floyd Mayweather Jr. is not known for coming forward at people, that he cannot do that. And that was the downfall of Zab Judah. And this is me adding to the conversation, that was what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did to Zab Judah that Zab Judah didn't expect. Zab thought that this was going to be a chess match and Floyd Mayweather Jr. didn't engage in that. Floyd was not fighting on the back foot. He basically came straight at him with a high guard and was wearing him down and really looking for the knockout when you wouldn't have expected him to go to the big puncher like that. And when other times he may fight depending on what the guy's giving you. And in the case of Errol Spence Jr., all Errol would have to do is do it in spurts. Whenever Terence makes some adjustment and thinks he figures Errol out, all Errol does, what Errol might do is just make an adjustment himself, go on the back foot, and then try to bait Terence Crawford to come in, throwing shots, opening himself up and counter Terence, because Terence does have wide looping fights, punches at times when he's really going for the knockout. So not saying that this fight is guaranteed to be one way or the other. However, Errol Spence Jr. is going into this fight with the full understanding of what Terence Crawford can do. Terence Crawford can fight going backwards. He can go fight coming forwards. He can fight. He can counter punch. He can take the lead. Errol knows that he can do all of these things, and that will allow Errol and his team to figure out exactly the best approach to deal with all of those facets of his game. But if Terence Crawford is not respecting the well-roundedness of Errol's game, then he may think that not be equipped to dealing with the shifts that a guy that he underestimates comes with. And that is what happened to Marco Antonio with Prince Nassim Ahmed and Marco Antonio Barrera. Underestimated what this guy was bringing to the table, underestimated his athleticism, underestimated his speed, underestimated how the being fundamentally sound actually increases your speed, because you may not have as quick a fast twitch muscles as someone else may have, but if you're throwing them straighter and you are in better position, they're going to land straighter because of where they're coming from. But anyway, I just thought that was a really, really interesting educational conversation. And a fight that I certainly hope is going to happen. I still say I think Errol's going to win the fight, because I don't know how he's going to deal with that plan A, but just believing that the guy doesn't have a plan B or an ability to do something else could be your downfall. If you think you've figured it out, now you're going to get aggressive, and all of a sudden what you thought was there is not there anymore. And now you got to make another adjustment. Now he's back to being aggressive on you, right? So there's just a lot of stuff that can happen in that regard when you get overconfident and you do not give a man credit for being, if you think this dude is going to be completely one-dimensional. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the matter and the input that I got from really reliable people. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.